working class regarded any educated or successful person as an enemy and a traitor. A new class of Soviet intelligentsia was created. Stalin maintained that this social layer should be formed from the working class. His definition clearly testifies that in a Soviet country, anyone with a different background would have felt utterly uncomfortable, to say the least. On the other hand, the government doubled the number of recreation centres, resorts, sports halls and gyms, while the official propaganda emphasised the importance of physical, bodily development. This was the initial stage of breeding new Soviet people, designed to exploit their physical abilities. These people can be called the Soviet working class. But a physically well-built and strong person soon becomes overambitious, believing in his own almightiness. The outstanding industrial achievements of the workers, lavishly sustained by various government incentives, resulted in their complete mental paralysis, rendering the Soviet population easy to manipulate and to keep in submission. Consequently, they unanimously supported the Soviet ideology, accepted only one social class, that of the workers and peasants, and idolized the leader. An ideal means of managing such a society was to unite these into a group, or rather into two, as the military represented the other. It seems a rather clever decision to divide such a large multinational and multi-ethnic country into two social segments. They were easy to control and balanced each other perfectly. In the 1930s, Stalin abolished the right to possess land. Instead, he created collective farms, which included the entire rural population, or peasants. Soviet propaganda actively promoted collectivization through placards, pamphlets, newspapers, and special documentary films. The working class needed an aim, so the Soviet government generously supplied it with short and long-term goals. What can be more thrilling than the pleasure of getting a transitory flag in recognition of one's achievement? Every sphere of human activity was being reshaped. Science, culture, sports, each with a distinct Soviet hue. An increased physical potential resulted in a new wave of construction. Houses, public buildings, bridges and roads appeared at an increased speed. Surely a comparison was drawn with the earlier times.
На месте неуклюжего собора, очага мракобесия, выстроен дом правительства.
The number of orphanages for the homeless children increased alongside new buildings. The majority are the children of the exiled and the purged. The state takes good care of the young generation. Educational programs are diverse and all-embracing. The Young Pioneers organization was created, where the youth were coordinated, just like the peasants on collective farms. There were times when they were held responsible for their parents' disloyalty. But the authorities quickly realized they could benefit from the unstable adolescent psyche, so they were cleared of the duty to pay for their parents' guilt. Indeed, such an approach proved highly beneficial for the government. It was quite common for children to denounce their own parents, for which they were often proclaimed heroes. Eventually, they joined the homeless in the orphanages, and their future was already decided. This category became the wordless executors of the leaders' orders and excellent soldiers of the Red Army. The army, enlisting workers and peasants, remained the main pillar of the Soviet Union. Immeasurable human and material resources were used to support the Red Army, its strengthening and its armament. As well as in other Soviet republics, the military training in Georgia was well organized. The Red Army was considered to be one of the most numerous and powerful in the world. The whole world feared the potential of the invincible Red Army, all except one person who needed more arguments to become convinced. A couple of words should be said about the man, especially that he had all the qualities of a leader, alongside clear paranoia symptoms. The scene looks like a fire worship ritual on a massive scale. It is truly amazing that such primitive rituals could still be popular in the 20th century. More astounding is the reaction of the public, which entirely concurs with the paranoid ideas and goals of its leader. Watching this footage, one cannot help imagining that soon beautifully adorned mammoths will be sacrificed to honor the leader. Regrettably, the leaders of the time opted for human sacrifice, not one or two, but thousands, even millions. Arguably, we all have basic instincts, which need to be triggered or cleverly manipulated. And here is a suitable candidate for that role. People listen to their leader, praise him, agree, and carry out his every order. Drop bombs and kill others. Kill and drop bombs on others. Miraculously, after the leader's death, suddenly everyone appeared to be innocent, and all the atrocities were ascribed to Hitler and his henchmen. Without any formal declaration, on the 22nd of June 1941, Germany invaded the Soviet Union, annihilating the Non-Aggression Pact signed between the two countries in 1939.
Граждане и гражданки Советского Союза, сегодня в 4 часа утра без объявления войны германские регулярные части атаковали наши границы во многих местах и подвергли бомбежке наши города.
Together with other republics, Georgia actively participated in the war against Germany. It is estimated that 750,000 Georgians were sent to the front, which proportionately is the highest figure of all Soviet republics. Georgian soldiers were noted for their bravery on Soviet territory, as well as in Europe. Also, they actively participated in the guerrilla war, joining the partisan groups in Poland, Hungary, Czechoslovakia, Bulgaria, Italy, and other European countries. There was no actual military action on Georgian territory, but the whole country, the general public and industry contributed to the outcome of the war. Heavy industry produced ammunition for the front. The food and manufacturing industries supplied the front line with food and clothes. Each and every Georgian tried to contribute to victory by working hard, by securing a constant supply for the front. On the whole, in monetary terms, the support given by Georgia during World War II amounted to over 3 million rubles. But the Republic gave much more. 400,000 Georgian soldiers who sacrificed the most precious thing they had, their lives. The overambitious world ruler seems rather changed. This is his true face. No, he's acting again as if everything is fine. In truth, he was cured by the Soviet therapy, but it failed to save him. As a rule, this kind of illness is fatal.
Слава нашей героической Красной Армии, отстоявшей независимость нашей Родины и завоевавшей победу над врагом. Слава нашему великому народу, народу-победителю. Вечная слава героям, павшим в боях и отдавшим свою жизнь за свободу и счастье нашего народа. С победой вас, мои дорогие соотечественники и соотечественницы!
The country celebrates victory. It is all too natural. It is hard to hide emotions and curb feelings after winning a 4-year-long war. The war changed many aspects of the life of a Soviet. It brought more self-confidence, more sense of dignity, and more respect towards the leader. Even those who had never showed much respect for the leader were obliged to admit they changed their attitude. A new type of Soviet person emerged after the war, that of the victorious Soviet. Having gone through all the nightmares of the war, hardship and human loss, people slowly returned to their ordinary lives. In numbers, the devastation caused by the war was truly staggering. More than 27 million Soviet people perished in World War II, and the economic loss to the country amounted to several billion rubles. Many Soviet towns and cities lay in ruins. It took an inhuman effort and willpower to restore the country. A new wave of construction swept across the Soviet Union, Georgia included. New factories, new flats for the working class were built. Having triumphed in the war, the Soviet authorities became more self-confident. It was used as a solid argument for justifying Stalin's methods of ruling the country. The government was now using much more pressure in implementing its decisions. After the decree of 1946, Soviet art forms were to comply with the Communist Party dogmas. Every artist was now obliged to praise the Soviet authorities and the leader in every piece of his or her work. Georgian art always held a distinguished position in the Soviet Union. Just like before the war, Georgian artists were still regarded as disloyal to the authorities. New enemies replaced the former small-scale farmers. Cosmopolitans and nationalists presented a new threat. The relatives of the earlier émigrés, as well as the soldiers who had been in German war camps, were likewise regarded as unreliable citizens. Despite the heroism of the Georgian soldiers and the self-denial of the Georgian people during the World War, the authorities continued to treat its own citizens with suspicion and distrust. As a rule, all punitive measures carried out in Georgia were closely monitored by Lavrenti Beria from Moscow. In December 1951, without any formal warning or court sentence, more than 20,000 Georgian artists, writers and public figures were exiled to the Central Asian republics to live and work on collective farms.
საბჭოთა კავშირის კომუნისტური პარტიის ცენტრალური კომიტეტი, საბჭოთა კავშირის მინისტრთა საბჭო და საბჭოთა კავშირის უმაღლესი საბჭოს პრეზიდიუმი უდიდესი მწუხარების გრძნობით აუწყებენ პარტიასა და საბჭოთა კავშირის ველა მშრომელს, რომ 5 მარტს საღამოს 9 საათსა და 50 წუთზე ძიმი ავადმყოფობის შემდეგ გარდაიცვალა საბჭოთა კავშირის მინისტრთა საბჭოს თავმჯდომარე და საბჭოთა კავშირის კომუნისტური პარტიის ცენტრალური კომიტეტის მდივანი იოსებ ბესარიონის ძე სტალინი. შავი არხშია შემოევლო ალისფერ დროშებს. გლოვის ზარი დაირხა საქართველოს ველაკუთხეში.
Soon after Stalin's death, Beria was charged with an attempt to usurp power and executed. The man with the sad face holding the leader's coffin is Nikita Khrushchev, one of Stalin's team members. Being one of the team automatically meant sharing the responsibility for all the atrocities of the last 30 years. However, after coming to power, Khrushchev made an awkward attempt to free himself of his share of the responsibility. The main focus of his political approach was fighting the personality cult. It was clear for many that such a denouncement didn't aim at abolishing the practice of idealization in Soviet society. He was primarily driven by revenge towards the deceased leader and the remaining team members. It is highly convenient for an avenger to hold the leading position in the country, making it easier to fight against the name, the pictures, and the statues of one's dead opponent. The Georgian public found it hard to come to terms with defiling the dead, especially that Stalin and Beria were both Georgians by birth. In March 1956, a rally organized by Georgian students at Stalin's monument in Tbilisi was ruthlessly dispersed by the Soviet Special Task Force. Approximately 150 young people died in their attempt to protect their national dignity. The new leader clearly demonstrated that he wouldn't tolerate any criticism of his decisions and that he was as merciless as his predecessor. As usual, the Georgian authorities watched the events from a distance, getting directives from the Kremlin, just like a placid teacher from the school headmaster. In order to divert public attention from such events, the Republican authorities reverted to tried and tested methods. Khrushchev visited Georgia quite often, especially that he was related to Vasil Shevardnadze, the head of the Georgian government. They were married to sisters. Sometimes he had a rest in Georgia, making the proletariat happy on the way. At other times, he'd bring along visitors from Cuba. There are technological and scientific achievements. A Soviet was the first to look at our planet from space. At least we beat the capitalists in this field. It seems we used to beat everyone else in this one too. And no doubt no one in the galaxy beats us in this.
Приглашаем вас в поездку.
под музыку. Левое колено к груди. Опустить. Правое. Опустить. Раз, два, три, четыре. Выдох. Вдох.
Just like film itself, Soviet reality became slightly more coloured. Looking at these people, one wonders at the human ability to be transformed. Where are those who were writing anonymous defamations only 10 years ago? Or those executing workers for a minor technical mistake? Or those semi-literate sentencing writers and academics to eternal exile? Or those destroying ancient churches and shooting priests in the forehead while they knelt in prayer? They underwent transformation together with the changing times. They chose not to be in the limelight any longer. The next developmental stage of a Soviet, humane Soviet man. The new leader of the country, Leonid Brezhnev, is mild. He initiated all the changes of the period. The world began to talk about peace and disarmament.
Мы высказываемся за созыв Всемирной конференции для рассмотрения вопросов разоружения во всем их объеме.
He's also more popular with the common people. The grateful population, quite appropriately, called his time in office the stagnation period. If millions aren't executed every year, if 27 million don't perish in the war, what else can one call such existence? More tourists started to arrive. The whole world wanted to know what was going on behind the Iron Curtain, wished to see how solid the Soviet stage settings were. It's true that all the personnel, including the driver and the hotel manager, are KGB informers, but it's just a thoughtful effort on the part of the authorities to guarantee peaceful lives for their citizens. No one living in a country where millions were accused of spying for enemies and executed for treason has the moral right to trust a foreigner with a camera. Despite such close attention, Western capitalist culture conquered the Soviet Union. This capitalist culture managed to defeat Soviet art with its leader portraits and collective farm canvases.
Amerikeli vale balestis maikar. Tagi was confirm burti. Ara. Apela to gatsue. Prosta momto. Matu. Что у вас написано на майке?
Не знаю.
У вас написано Georgia State University. Это, значит, университет штата Джорджия. А где находится штат Джорджия?
По-моему, в Америке.
В Америке. А как столица Соединенных Штатов?
В Лос-Анджелесе, естественно.
Лос-Анджелес. Спасибо.
There were more and more American and European films shown in the cinemas. Needless to say, the watchful Soviet censorship cut scenes inappropriate for the high moral standards of its citizens. But even without a foreign star's bare breasts, it was still extremely interesting to get to know the culture of another country. The scale of corruption and nepotism became alarming. It quickly overtook the speed of building communism in the country. Suddenly, there was the opportunity of purchasing virtually anything, any higher education diploma, party positions, restaurant director positions, and so on and so forth, ad infinitum. Georgian wines and spirits were particularly popular in the big Soviet cities, helping Georgian students in their efforts to complete their higher education. But there certainly were free positions for a handful of talented young people. They were always welcome as Komsomol secretaries on some God-forgotten collective farms. Unfortunately, Such a system was bound to affect the Soviet product quality. Not a single product, whether clothes items or pieces of household